Welcome to the show, Matt.
Hey, thanks for having me, JD. Appreciate it.
No problem at all. My favorite question to ask is what's your sober date?
It's 4/27, 2024, and it's super easy for me to remember that. There's a quick Google trick I learned when I was first going through my journey. I'd Google that just to remember how many days has it been? Has it been 6? Has it been 8? Has it been 12? And now every time I open a browser tab and I type the letter D, Google autocorrects to days since 4/27/24. And
That's
that's really
funny.
helpful. I do that multiple times a day, every day, just to remind myself, Matt, it's been 180 something days now. Don't do it. Don't do it. Every time I type the letter D, auto
That's
completes and I
awesome.
hit enter.
Yeah. Um, that's also my sister's birthday,
No
and
way.
it's also 2 days after I went to rehab in 2018. My clean date from opiates is 4/25/18.
Wow.
So yeah, I remember. I have four different dates that I hold close to me, and it's that day. Leap day in 2020, February 29th is the last time I woke up hungover and I decided to stop drinking. April 1st of this past year was when I quit benzos and weed, and July 13th is when I quit gambling. So I hold four dates that are close to me, you know what I mean? And they're easy to remember because they mean a lot. You're muted by accident. There you
My dog was squeaking on something, but yeah, they're big days, and that's my one for now. But it's great to have those things, etch them in stone. Good for you.
Yeah, what was going on April 26th of 2024?
So my New Year's resolution on January 1st was figure out the alcohol situation in my life. I knew that I had been drinking way too much, and I just put it out there like I'm drinking too much. My New Year's resolution is come up with a plan. I don't know what that plan is. I live in Texas, so at first I was thinking, well, if I'm ever out of the state, maybe I'll drink then. If I'm out on vacation, out at a conference, I'll have some alcohol there. So that's the first rule I tried this year, 2024, January 1st. Matt's not drinking in Texas anymore. And I went to New Orleans 3 weeks later over MLK weekend in January, and I drank quite a bit. And what I learned about myself is when I went from everyday drinking, which is what I was doing, to only drinking every once in a while, the same amount of alcohol, the same number of beers would hit me way harder. And when I was in New Orleans, I was actually on air. I was streaming a major event and I was drinking while I was streaming. That's kind of the vibe, New Orleans stuff.
Yeah.
And I said some really, really mean things about several of the people we featured in the event. And one of them even called me out on it afterwards. He messaged me and called me an asshole. And I had to do a whole lot of reflecting. Like, man, when I drink, I get mean. When I drink, I say things that are really hurtful to other people, and I say them for no reason. I
Yeah.
took that and I did a lot of reflecting on it. Left Texas again, drank again, went to another work convention in April. I had one margarita and I met my boss for the first time and ended up projectile vomiting that night. I woke up with a terrible hangover after even just one margarita. And it was at that point, that was 4/26. I'm like, we're done. Even one margarita makes me say dumb stuff in front of my boss, makes me throw up the next day. We're done. We're not doing this anymore. I don't care if I'm in Texas. I don't care if I'm in London. I'm not doing this. And that was
Yeah.
my story.
It almost turns out into binge drinking, right? Like you go from an everyday, 12 pack a day or a 30 pack a day or a bottle a day. You go from that consistency to, okay, now I'm in New Orleans. So now I have to make up for lost time and I'm going to overdo it to make up for the fact that I'm not drinking back in Texas.
Precisely, yeah. I mean, the event I was at, we got free drink coupons, so I took all three of mine. I got three from my buddy, and definitely that we got to make up for lost time. And then I almost missed my job the next day because I was sleeping off the hangover and trying not to throw up. And it's like,
Yeah.
you can't do this, Matt. You've been doing this for 10 years. Grow up, stop. And I
Yeah.
stopped.
How old are you?
I'm 32.
Okay. So where are you from originally?
I'm born and raised in Austin, Texas. Right now, I live in San Antonio, but I'm about to move back to Austin.
Okay. Austin's a cool city.
Absolutely.
There's a lot going on there. I used to be part of the comedy scene, and I always said if I would have been still, because I did stand up comedy and active addiction, it was the first time I stood up on a stage and said I'm JD and I'm an alcoholic, I would say that in stand up in the rooms, and that's how I would start off my show. And I almost wore it like a badge of honor, like I'm JD and I'm an addict, and just put myself out there for the first time. And it would get a laugh, but and that's what my intention was. But I wasn't like actually doing anything about it at the time. But I think in another universe, if I would have kept using and kept doing stand up, I would have moved to Austin, Texas, where everybody's moving to do comedy. Ever since Joe Rogan went down there, all the comedians have been going down there and starting up shows and the comedy mothership and all that shit. Um, so you're from Austin. You have any brothers or sisters? You an only child?
I am the middle of five, so that makes me this one right here, and that says a lot about my personality.
You got middle? Do you have middle child syndrome? My brother does.
Absolutely, yeah. I got to steal the show from everybody. I've got an older sister and an older brother and a younger sister, so I know how all of the siblings work, and I know how
Yeah,
to make it back about me all over again.
that's awesome. Parents still together? Did they divorce at all?
They're still together, and looking at my parents is a big part of the reason I chose sobriety. I don't want to air out my entire family's dirty laundry on YouTube, but needless to say, addiction runs in my family on both ends of my family tree. It's something that my family is still struggling with, and it's something that I became complicit with. Every holiday, I was the enabler. You know, the alcoholics in our family don't want to go grab another drink in front of everybody, so they ask me to fill up their cups again and again and again. And I got sick of it. I got sick of enabling everybody in my family to go on these benders every holiday and then getting sucked into it myself. If I'm getting them a drink, I'm getting me a drink too. And we all turn drunk. We all turn mean. We all scream about each other or scream at each other about politics. And it's like, this is just so unhealthy. Nobody in my family even likes getting back together because of this. So this is my way of planting my flag. My family's going to do what they're going to do, but I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to be complicit in their stories anymore.
How old were you when you first started drinking?
I first started drinking seriously at 21. Messed with it a little bit underage, but not too much. And it wasn't until 22 when I got my first job as a high school teacher. That's when I started drinking a lot. There's a lot of trauma you see, a lot of stories you wish you could just put away, and alcohol became my escape. There were days where a student would tell me something or I'd see something, and I get this thought, even if it's 9 a.m., like, we're drinking vodka tonight. Whatever I heard, I had to make it go away. You know, a student confides in me that her boyfriend sexually assaulted her. The first thing I think is I'm going to go drink until I don't think about this tonight, because otherwise those haunts are going to spin in my head. And that's when I
Yeah,
started getting out of control.
yeah. I mean, that's never easy, especially if you're a young teacher. People feel like they can confide in you. Were you a high school teacher or a middle school teacher?
High school, I taught mostly 17 and 18-year-olds, and I was 22 when I started. So there's a lot of that. And it's great. You know, I like that students can confide in me. The problem is I didn't have an outlet to take that stress and to go productively work it out. You know, in hindsight, if I had been exercising, maybe I could have, worked out that stress or anxiety at the gym, on the weight machine, or in the pool. If I had been doing anything else healthy, hiking, I could have used that as my escape. If I had a therapist,
I
I
was
could
going
have
to
used
say
that as my escape.
therapy. Yeah,
Yeah. But
even
I don't know.
even Tony Soprano. I always say even Tony Soprano needed a therapist. You know, everybody needs a therapist, and if you're a therapist, you need a therapist, and it's as simple as that. Because we can't hold everybody's secret, and I always say our secrets keep us sick, and we can only handle so much before we need to feel like we need to escape with an outlet. And if your outlet you have is something where you're going to be like, okay, well, I'm going to drink over this shit and feel better, but because alcohol becomes the answer to everything, whether it was a good day, you're like, oh, I had a great day today, I'm going to celebrate with a drink, or I had a bad day today, I need to take away this pain with a drink. You're always going to find an excuse to drink more.
Exactly. Exactly. And if it's a boring day, I'm bored. Let's go drink. Like, it doesn't matter if it's good, bad, or neutral. The answer is always alcohol. And When the answer is always alcohol, you need to rethink your analysis. You need to rethink how you're getting to that conclusion. And hey, that's what I've done.
What did you teach in high school?
I taught science courses, a little bit of chemistry, biology, anatomy and physiology, pathophysiology, kind of the whole science gamut except physics.
Okay, so you went to school for that.
Yeah, I've got a kind of convoluted college history, but I did 4 years in college studying biology, did 4 years of teaching high school, burned out of that, lots of trauma, never got a therapist. If you're ever a teacher, get a therapist. And went back to pharmacy school, studied pharmacy for 4 years, and saw the US healthcare system, saw what it did to people, saw how we got far too many people hooked on benzos, far too many people hooked on opioids.
Yeah.
And I refuse to be complicit in it. I'm not going to sit there and dispense 270 hydrocodone tablets to every patient who walks in with the script for that. And I've seen in the hospitals how these things come back and impact people, how people have seizures and die when they try to abruptly withdraw from either alcohol or opioids.
Or benzos.
Benzos rather. Yeah.
You can literally die from two things, and it's alcohol and it's benzos.
Yeah, there are other things you can withdraw from that will make you wish you were dead, but those are the two that can kill you.
Yeah, opiates sucked getting off of, but like in my head, I kept saying, "You're not going to die. This isn't going to kill you. This is just going to be really uncomfortable for a long time." And there are certain people that have so many different medical problems that opioid withdrawal can kill them if they have low iron or, iron deficiency. I find that a lot of women are deficient in iron, and they have more of a chance for it to be fatal if they're not under supervision while they're withdrawing from opiates. And I work for a hospital system. I do orthopedics and podiatry and wound care. And I have to look at medical lists, all day. And so many people are on benzos. It is outrageous. And it's just, for me, I've been clean from benzos, like I said, since April 1st. And it was so easy. My dad passed away last June, and I said to my psychiatrist, like, I need something. He goes, okay, I'll give you Ativan. And then, within 3 months, by November, I was abusing my Ativan. So I then manipulated him into giving me Valium. And what do? I abuse that. I do a Google, can you snort Valium? Google said, yes, you can. So I start snorting my Valium. And it wasn't until my wife was like, you're missing a lot of pills, and called me out on it. And, they're like, you're not sober anymore. Like, you're not sober anymore, JD. And, that's when I weaned down a little bit from it just so withdrawals couldn't, affect me. And luckily I was on 10 milligrams of Valium, and I was doing like 60 milligrams a day, but only for like 3 months. So it wasn't going to kill me because it wasn't like I was doing 10, 20 Xanax a day. And I knew it was just going to be uncomfortable and I would lose sleep. And it is what it is. Take some melatonin or take some Benadryl, and I'd be good to go. And plus, I'm a severe insomniac, so I'm on sleep meds to begin with. Olanzapine is what I take, and it's really helpful for me. It's a lot better than Seroquel. Put me in the hospital. Ambien just didn't do shit. I'm sure you're familiar with both of them. Yeah. Seroquel put me in the hospital. I took it. I was laying in bed, and then my heart started racing. And we have a monitor that does your blood pressure because my blood pressure was bad at one point, and my heart rate was 180 beats per minute. So I Googled Seroquel heart rate, and it said immediately in bold, go to the ER right away. I'm like, fuck. This is not what I want to do at 11 o'clock at night. And they had to monitor me for 4 hours after they gave me meds to make sure my heart rate got down to under 120 before they let me go. And I was like, okay, never taken Seroquel again. Let's try something new. But you saw that and you decided that wasn't the right path for you?
Absolutely, yeah. And like you owned the words. You go up on the stage and you say, "I'm JD and I'm an addict," or "I'm JD and I'm an alcoholic." I own the words with my doctor, and this is something that empowered me, and I think more patients should do. I was going through some serious mental health issues during pharmacy school. Working in the ICU is horrible for your psyche because 27% of your patients are going to die if they're in the ICU. It is what it is. You're going to see it a lot, and it sucks to be around. Uh, that was hard for me to see. And I went to go see a doctor because I knew these thoughts are bad. I need to talk to somebody. I need something. But when I talked to that doctor, the very first thing I said is, I have a tendency to overuse or misuse substances, and I know this about myself. I don't want to start anything with any kind of addictive potential. Because I'm a pharmacist and I know which medications do and don't tend to have that, I know what to avoid. But first line for I've got bad insomnia, I've got a lot of anxiety, racing thoughts. I think a lot of doctors would throw a benzo at you. I refused. I will not start a benzo because I know it's not going to be good for me. Because I know, looking at my family, looking at my history, looking at how we've done things, I'll be the one snorting them myself too. And I'm not doing that. I'm not even opening up that slippery slope. Now, I
Yeah.
will say there's a time and a place for opioids. They're fantastic medications for relieving the most intense pain, but they need to be reserved for absolute last line. I shattered my leg in 3 places and I'm in immense pain. I have cancer in my bones and everything hurts all the time. There's a place for compassionate use of opioids. We use them way too much right now. And anytime your doctor gives you an add on for those opioids, I wouldn't even pick them up. Go get them if you need them, but leave them at the pharmacy. Don't bring them home.
Yeah.
That's how I empowered myself. And I wish more patients would just open up, be completely honest with your doctor. Your doctor will not judge you. Your doctor will not call the cops on you. Just say that I struggle with these things and I don't want anything with addictive potential. Your doctor will certainly work with you on that.
Yeah. Steve-O's sober, right? You know who Steve-O is.
Sort of. Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
From Jackass. Right.
Jackass. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's been sober like 12 years or something like that. He shattered his ankle and it's all screws and plates and all that. And he was like 3 years into his sobriety and he just took Tylenol and ibuprofen because he refused to take anything else because he was afraid of the relapse. Once
Yeah.
I heard that, I was like, okay, I can get through this pain. Like I had my gallbladder removed in recovery 3 years ago. So I was 2 years into my clean time with opiates. And they took my gallbladder out because I demolished my gallbladder in addiction because you're throwing up bile all the time. So my gallbladder was like 95% not functioning. And so they had to remove it right away. And I woke up and I told them no opiates, no opiates at all. And I woke up and I felt high. And I said, like I'm high to the nurse. And she said, no, it's the anesthesia. And then the doctor came in. He's like, well, you looked uncomfortable. So we gave you a shot of Dilaudid and a shot of fentanyl. And I was like, dude, I'm going to go into withdrawal now. And he's like, no, you'll be fine. Like, no, I wasn't. I threw up for 18 hours in withdrawal. Like, that shit was not fine. I had to hold a pillow to my stomach while I was throwing up because of the incisions. I didn't want them to break open. All because you thought I looked uncomfortable. I was pissed, dude. I was pissed.
That's a frustrating story, man. Me as a healthcare provider, I'm very frustrated. There are other options that are non-opioids that we can use to keep people sedated in surgery. And I get you don't want your patient to wake up on the table. If they do and they flail and you nick an artery, patient's gone. But if a patient says no opioids, I've struggled with this before, I can't do that again. Man, a doctor needs to respect that. Oh, I'm sorry that happened to you, JD.
Yeah, it's wild. So you said you were at a conference earlier this year?
Yeah. I attend pharmaceutical conferences as part of what I do, just to learn more about what we do. And then the first conference in New Orleans actually is something completely different. It is my healthy outlet. I play in competitive Scrabble tournaments, just the board game Scrabble. And there's
Yeah.
something very nice and peaceful about it. It is me, it is my opponent, it is this board game, and there is nothing else. It's my place to put down the phones, to turn off the TV, to get away from all of it and just play a board game. And that's my healthy outlet. And I'm going to keep that a part of my life forever.
Have you been playing it? Were you playing it as a kid a lot?
Yeah. My family, when I was young, middle of five kids, you know, hyper competitive. Every Friday night, we'd play a board game and watch a movie together. And my older brother loved Scrabble because he was really, really, really good at it. I got sick of losing to my older brother, so I doubled down and tripled down and quadrupled down and started memorizing lists of two-letter words so that I could do the stacking thing and get extra points. And then he got competitive about it too, and we kind of fed off each other and
The
just kept doing it.
QIs is a big one. And
Yeah.
no, I got competitive as a kid with my grandmother. My grandmother taught me how to play Scrabble as a kid. And my grandma lived down the shore. I'm from South Jersey, so we stayed down the shore by the beach. And she lived down there, so we would go down there all the time. And every time we went down there, we'd break out Scrabble, and there'd be four of us playing around the table, and we would play that like 2 games in a night. And then we put the final score on the fridge, so whoever won could have the clout of the scoreboard on the fridge and talk shit for the next couple of days. And my grandmother taught me how to be ruthless in it, and now I can beat her. Now I'm 38, and when we play, she's like 88, and she doesn't have all her faculties, and I feel bad beating her, but I'm not going to let her win like she.
Yeah. My very first Scrabble tournament, I was 12 years old, and I was beaten by a woman who was 91 in an electric wheelchair with an oxygen mask hooked up, and she clocked me. You know, those old grandmas who've been playing for 30 years are ruthless, man. They're tough.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my healthy grind. And every Monday night I play Scrabble Club with my friends in Austin. Every Thursday night I play Scrabble at the Scrabble Club with my friends in San Antonio. You know, this is a really good sober outlet for me to just go, still have some fun, still talk to some people.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I have to drink. You're familiar with Austin. The entire culture in Austin is go drink. Do you go to 6th Street? Do you go to Rainy Street? Do you go to a brewery? Do you go to a bar? But I feel like in a town with a lot of young people and a major university that's a big party school, that's what you do in Austin. And it's hard. So finding a good sober hobby in Scrabble Club. Now I've started swimming laps at Barton Creek. Those are two great sober hobbies that keep me going, that give me a thing to do, that expose me to some sunshine, help me talk to some new people, and keep me out of the bottle. And that's good.
You said you work in the ICU?
I had a rotation in the ICU. Your last year of pharmacy school, you do 7 6-week rotations at a bunch of different sites. So, I was at a Walgreens for 6 weeks, just learning what you do back there. I was in an ICU for 6 weeks, learning how to manage that. I was just in a hospital pharmacy, learning how to mix up the IV bags. I worked at an HIV pharmacy. It just specializes in getting HIV meds for people who can't afford them on their own, but would die if they don't get access to these meds. So kind of been around, but as I did each of those rotations, the big thing I got is healthcare is not for me. Healthcare is not for me. You see people at their very, very lowest points. You see people with preventable diseases that we could have gotten in front of them if we just gave them insulin, but people can't afford insulin, and then they don't take it, and then their toes need to be amputated. It's despicable to me, and I couldn't do it. So I want to go back to the high school classroom. I want to teach kids who are going to be doctors, and I want to teach them how to treat every single patient with compassion and empathy, no matter what that patient is going through. That's my calling.
Yeah. And you said Walgreens. I will give Walgreens credit. When it was 2012, I started doctor shopping. I had a doctor that would literally write me anything. You know how most doctors, they give a referral for a patient to see a specialist. Well, this doctor needed a referral from another patient, just to say like he's not a cop. And it was $150 a visit, only cash, no insurance was taken. And you sit down with the doctor and he says, well, what do you want? And I was like 120 30 milligram oxycodone and 120 2 milligram Xanax bars. Wrote my script. Says, okay, see you in 28 days. And when I would go to fill the script, Walgreens would never fill it. Walgreens always refused to fill my script. CVS would fill it, Walmart would fill it, Sam's Club would fill it, Rite Aid would fill it, and they all had different manufacturers. And my drug of choice was 30 milligram oxycodone. That was my drug of choice, and I knew like the ones that had V's on them at CVS carried would make my face break out in hives. But if I went to Walmart, they had the M1 or the A215 ones, and I really liked them. And then Target had the M ones, and I really liked that, the Malincott ones. I think it's Malincott, right? I've been out of the game for a while.
I think so.
Yeah, they made the most popular one, and Target used them. So, you learn which pharmacies to go to get your shit filled. And then if I was in a crunch and nobody had them in stock, I would go to CVS and just bite the bullet and get a V. There was one night we drove 45 minutes down to a CVS in Delaware and to get my script filled at like 7 o'clock at night. We drove down there in the snow to get my script filled because nobody else had it in stock. And we worked our way all the way down South Jersey into Delaware. And it's the insanity of addiction.
Yes.
And you're saying you want to go back to high school to teach again?
I do. Yeah. Just the pharmacy world was so wild, and seeing people like you doing the things you're doing. And at me as a compassionate person, I'm like, well, if I don't get this person their opioid, they're going to withdraw, and that's bad. But if I do, I'm complicit in this cycle, and I'm just helping them, and I'll see them again 28 days and all that. So it sounds like what Walgreens did and what most pharmacies chains do is they have a list of doctors we suspect are pill mills. And if we suspect they're a pill mill, we put their name in our system and we stop filling any prescription from them. And it sounds like that's what happened to your doc. And Walgreens got them before anybody else. There's probably just one pharmacist in Walgreens who decided, I'm going to take that extra step. I'm going to file the paperwork and make sure we don't fill from this doc. And the reality is most pharmacists are so overworked and most pharmacies are so understaffed that even though most pharmacists would love to do that and single out that pill mill doctor we've identified, we just don't have the time.
Yeah.
And that's frustrating too. But excited to hear that Walgreens was able to flag at least that one. I've seen it happen a bunch of times, and it'll continue to happen. Where it's happening now more than anywhere else is with the stimulants, the ADHD medications. If you don't know what a stimulant is, they're a couple chemical moieties away from meth.
Yep.
And they hit very similar to meth. And I feel like for some people, they're a gateway to meth. I feel like for other people, maybe they're an escape from meth. But
it's so bad that there's a shortage of Adderall.
There was a huge shortage of Adderall during the pandemic, and I got screamed at on the phone 4 or 5 times a day because we didn't have it. And I'm like, well, I can't get any. The number of prescriptions for stimulants in this country has doubled in 2 years. That's not right, JD. That's not right. ADD doesn't pop out of nowhere. ADHD doesn't pop out of nowhere. People are trying to self-diagnose themselves on TikTok. People are unable to focus at home, but that doesn't mean they have a disability and require medication. It means they need to change their life. It means they need to rearrange their office. It means they need to switch jobs if they can't focus. But it does not mean that they need to start a stimulant medication every day.
And it takes it away from people that actually need it. My wife has MS. And she couldn't get Adderall for her MS because of the shortage. So they put her on well, what's the other alternative to Adderall?
There's a lot of them. Vyvanse, maybe, atomoxetine, Strattera.
I can't think of the name. Maybe with an M.
Methylphenidate.
It's some kind of I pick it up all the time, but I'm blanking on the name. It doesn't really matter, but yeah, she's on a different version. I'll think of the name after we hang up. She's on a different version of it, and it's been really helpful for her because with MS, you can't focus because you have lesions on your brain, and you know what I mean, and you need that extra stimulant to help. But there are people out there, like you said, are self-diagnosing, and then they're going to their doctor and they're like, oh, I have this going on, or people are learning what to say to doctors in order to get the drug.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you said it yourself. You were doctor shopping. You know how this works, and everybody knows how this works. That patients are smart. they're not stupid. They're gonna go figure out how to get what they want if they want it. And
Yeah.
it's absolutely bonkers to me how many stimulants are out there now. I am very concerned about the hearts of the people who take stimulants. Your heart rate goes up 25 beats per minute, and your heart beats a lot harder. And like any muscle in your body, when it works a lot harder, it's going to grow a lot thicker. But your heart grows too thick, and you end up with congestive heart failure in your 50s or 60s. If you use these stimulant medications, if you abuse methamphetamines, saw it over and over and over and over and over. And I'm really concerned for all these people misusing them now. You're going to be there in 20 years, in 30 years. Your heart's going to be far too thick. Your ejection fraction is going to be too low. And you're going to be taking furosemide and diuretics and heart medications for the rest of your life. It scares the crap out of me, JD.
Yeah, my doctor got shut down in 2014. I got a phone, I'm an outgoing person. So like I was friends with the nurses, secretaries there. And I got a phone call one day saying, hey, we're about to be raided. You got to come pick up your last script because this is the last script that you're going to get. And I had to run down there and get my last script real fast before that doctor got shut down. So he did lose his license. And, I don't know if he went to jail or what. The shadiest doctor isn't even my doctor. I had a friend that went to a doctor. He was getting prescribed 180 30s a month. And then they came up with you can't prescribe more than 4 a day was like the new rule. And so he gave him 120 30s, and then he gave him 68 milligram dilaudid to make up for that 60.
Man, that's wild. Here's what it is, I don't want to sit here and second guess the decisions of medical doctors, except that one I'm pretty sure we can second guess. That one we can say that's not what you do.
And pharmacies were filling both at the same time. That's like me walking in with a Valium script and a Xanax script and being like, hey, fill both of these for me. Yeah, I know that they're the same thing and they do the same action, but I need both right now because my doctor said so.
And I wish we had more autonomy as a pharmacist to say no. But the reality is, especially as we're shifting away from using a brick and mortar pharmacy and go into these mail order pharmacies, I've got buddies who are mail order pharmacists. You're not supposed to say no. You're just supposed to approve everything and send it on through and make $5 for the pharmacy every time you do it. And that scares me too. I really don't like that. I really don't like that.
Speaking of Texas and pharmacies, do you know what Mark Cuban is doing?
I do. I do know what he's doing.
You want to explain that a little bit too? Because that's really interesting.
Yeah, Mark Cuban has opened his own drug company that basically says, let's forego the U.S. healthcare system entirely. Let's forego big healthcare. Let's forego big insurance. All of your meds are available for, I think it's like $5 a piece. Just whatever you need, whatever we get it for. There's some meds he probably gets for 37 cents, and he makes a big profit when he sells it to you for $5. But when your insurance company gives you the same med, they're going to bill 117 or something absolutely ludicrous for it. So Mark Cuban's got his own. I don't remember the name offhand. Again, like you all remember it right after this. Yeah, but he's got his own.
Impressive. He didn't start that to make money. He started that to help people, be able to afford their medications for the first time. Older people who are getting prescribed these meds and can't afford, or people that have insulin and can't afford insulin. Like he's doing what Canada does. They actually make their, medications affordable to people. And I saw him on the Daily Show talking about it. And I was really impressed. And, I thought like, here's a billionaire who actually wants to make a change in the way that the healthcare system works.
He's fighting the good fight. And I mean, I could step on a soapbox and wax, politics right now with the election coming in a few days. I'm not going to do that. This podcast is not the place for that, except to say that the U.S. healthcare system is broken from bottom to top, and people fall through the cracks regularly. I hate to see that it's the people who can't afford their meds who come back in with a heart attack because they couldn't afford their blood thinner. They couldn't afford their Eliquis. I saw it all the time. And I got furious. I saw people coming in because they had a heart attack because their blood sugar was 530 because they couldn't afford their insulin because they wanted to buy Christmas gifts for their presents. And then they died. They died because they couldn't afford their insulin and their Christmas presents for their kids. I saw a construction worker come in right around Thanksgiving. He didn't take his insulin because he was saving up for the holidays. And he had a stroke because his blood sugar was over 500. He lost control of the use of his right hand. He's a construction worker. He's never going to work again. He's 51 years old and on disability for the rest of his life. I see stuff like that every day, and it drives me absolutely nuts. And here in Texas, the worst part is how we treat our homeless population who come in. They come in.
Austin has a rough homeless population, don't they?
They do. So there's this one bridge that I noticed for whatever reason, there were homeless people camped under, like 20 or 30 of them all the time in a part of town that didn't have many other homeless people. And I think to myself, why? Why is it here? Why this little pocket? Is there a stream nearby that gives them shelter? And it wasn't until I started doing my rotations that I realized, oh, we're right next to a hospital. These are people who got discharged from the hospital. They walk out the door, and this is where they are, and they go under a bridge. And many of these patients, we called them frequent flyers in the hospital because they were in every few days. A lot of them had type 2 diabetes. A lot of them needed insulin to manage their blood sugar. And one of the things about insulin is you have to keep it refrigerated. Well, in Austin, Texas, in July, if you're homeless, how on earth do you do that? Yeah. How on earth do you keep your insulin refrigerated? The answer is you don't. I would try to send these patients out with a styrofoam cooler and some ice. And I'd like, there's a gas station next, you can keep some ice, but you can't keep insulin on ice. You can't freeze it. It's got to be refrigerated. And what ended up happening over and over is these patients would go back into diabetic ketoacidosis because their insulin wouldn't work or they couldn't take it. And they'd just be back in the hospital 4 days later. And then we'd make money having the patients in our ED for 3 or 4 days, discharge them, and then see them again in 3 or 4 days. It was utterly despicable. And next time you see a homeless person under a bridge, don't think, man, they need to pick themselves up by the bootstraps and get in. The system is certainly oppressing them in some way. You need to treat them with empathy. And that's what I want to go do. I want to go teach high school, and I want to teach these kids to treat every single patient with empathy and compassion, no matter how long they've struggled with whatever they're struggling with.
Yeah, you must have heard some stories on working in the ICU.
Just horrific. I think the one that sticks with me the most that brought me to my sobriety is a man who was in his mid-40s. He drank a lot. And with these alcoholic patients, you don't really ever actually know how much they drink because often they don't know how much they drink. They just know they do a lot. And I saw a guy come in. He and his wife had a big argument, and he said, you know what, I'm quitting. I'm quitting alcohol cold turkey. JD, you know you're not supposed to do that.
Especially in your 40s.
Yeah, he 5 days later, he just felt awful, like flu-like symptoms, and then maybe a hallucination. And that's what brought him into the hospital, where he was moved over to the ICU. He went into delirium tremens, or DTs. You can Google that if you don't know the term yet, but that's maybe the worst thing that can happen in alcohol withdrawal. You go to DTs and then you have seizures and you might die. So we had to sedate him heavily with benzos to make sure he didn't seize. And he ended up being in the ICU for almost 6 weeks. He was a healthy, maybe slightly overweight, but otherwise very healthy man, mid-40s, tried to quit alcohol cold turkey. I was only in that ICU for 6 weeks. He was there for 5. And he was there longer. My rotation ended, and I don't know if he even made it out. I know at one point he was put on a paralytic. He was put on a ventilator. It got bad. There's no reason that man had to die. If we can talk about getting off of alcohol in healthy ways, if you can talk to your doctors about what you're doing, I mean, that's the one that sticks with me. That's the one that sticks with me most.
Yeah, it's wild, you know, what you see in the hospital. And, you know, I'm in a group on Facebook called HAMS. It's all about harm reduction. And I see people post like, oh, I have DTs. What should I do? And everyone in the comments like, go to the hospital. And then there's people that are constantly in the hospital, but trying to find a way to still drink. And they're like, well, you know, I have cirrhosis. I have a enlarged kidney or liver. So I think I'm gonna drink less, but I'm not gonna stop drinking. And will that reverse it? And it's like, no, just stop. Obviously, this is making your life unmanageable. Stop. Did you get into any kind of like how do you stay sober? Like besides like the swimming and the Scrabble, what else do you do for your sobriety?
I tell as many people as I can about it. That seems to empower me. If I say something, then I need to keep it true. And so I've posted on my Facebook page. All my friends know I'm not drinking anymore. I haven't really divulged exactly the reasons why. And I prefer to keep it that way. I'll let my close friends know that this is more a personal decision in the face of what I've seen my family struggle with, and less like it's not like I got a DUI and I have to change my life, or I hit rock bottom and I had to change my life that day. And I'm so thankful that I didn't need to hit a rock bottom to make this decision. I thought about the dumbest thing I've ever done drinking, which is get extremely drunk, trip over an amplifier, mess up my back really bad that I had a bruise for 3 months, and spent $400 buying shots for strangers at a bar. I decided I would make that night my rock bottom before I hit it even deeper rock bottom.
Yeah.
And then I told everybody, the more people I tell, the more podcasts I come on and do, the more I'm going to have to stick to this, right? And that empowers me. Everybody's got their own fuel, but that's mine, staying true to my word.
Yeah, I use meetings personally, but I mean I do this podcast too. Right now this is coming out in the middle of December, and I'm releasing new episodes every single day from Thanksgiving Eve until New Year's Day to highlight relapse during their holidays and to kind of make awareness around relapsing during the holidays. So I'm releasing daily episodes. And so that helps me because I'm going to like today, I'm going to record 7 podcasts. So that's, almost 7 hours of me talking about recovery. Plus I do Gamblers Anonymous at noon today. So, and I do NA during the week every day at noon. So, that helps me a lot too. Like those meetings gives me a healthy outlet to talk about recovery, to check in with where I'm at. In GA, they call it therapy time. And everyone who wants to speak, it's 5 minutes to talk about where they're at and where they're at in their recovery. So I find meetings helpful. And you're an academic, like you like to learn. I think you could learn a lot about yourself by joining one of them. If you were ever like interested in doing more, or ever felt like I might slip up and relapse, I would definitely look into like AA because of how much it's been beneficial for me and thousands of millions of other people that join the program. But that's just a recommendation based on you. As you seem like the kind of person that wants to learn as much as you can about anything that you're diving into.
Yeah. And one thing that medical schools do that I wish were a little bit more normalized is require students to sit in on an AA or an NA or any A meeting. You have
I've
to
seen
hear
them.
the stories.
Yeah, I've seen them. They come to the open meetings, and a lot of the times I see nurses come in, and it's part of like the nurse school that you have to like join. You have to go to so many AA meetings, and they will come and sit down and just listen. They wouldn't speak. They would just introduce themselves like, "Hey, I'm Lisa, and I'm a nursing student, and I'm here for school." And we all respect that, and we all still share whatever was on our mind, and not necessarily felt like we had to stifle our shares based on somebody who isn't an alcoholic in the room. Have you ever been to a meeting?
I'm going to be honest, I haven't. And it's something I should probably do. Now, I found a community in a different way. I have
Yeah.
my own personal trepidations with the 12-step program. I think it's just a little too faith-based for an academic person like me. But everybody's got their own thing that makes them happy.
Yeah.
And there are great, success metrics for a 12-step program. If that's your
Yeah.
jam, that's your jam. I found mine. I found a little blogging corner. I'm on medium.com, and I found a bunch of other people who have started their journey with sobriety in the last few weeks, months, or years. and we just clap for each other. We talk about it when we're struggling. And for me, I like to put my thoughts on paper more than say them out loud. And I like to see other people, I like to read. So other people put their thoughts on paper. And I found my little support group in that.
Yeah, my wife is not into the faith-based either for 12 steps. So they do recovery dharma. It's a Buddhist approach to recovery. And, right now they just finished a meeting and they're going to go into another one at noon. And, it's a lot about meditation and connection and connecting with other people and, whatever helps them stay sober. They got 4.5 years, just like I do. We both quit drinking on the same day. So, and she's what we call a garden variety drunk, just like you. Like her drug of choice was alcohol. And it was the end all be all until, she was 35 or 36. So I'm glad you're finding this kind of recovery at 32, because you can give yourself plenty of time to like learn a lot about why you drank or how you drank or what you drank. Like you said, you were mean. You were a mean drunk. Was that only when you drank certain things? Because like my wife can't drink whiskey because that's when she becomes mean.
Yeah, generally the hard liquor would push me harder and faster and get me to, say those things. I mean, I didn't really psychoanalyze it because it wasn't until I went back and listened to the recording of me talking about the Scrabble tournament that I'm like, Matt, why would you say that? That's horrible. You wouldn't say that to anybody. Like, what's wrong with you? I had to hear my own voice, go back and listen to it and be like, man, you're an asshole when you're drunk, Matt. And I bet everybody thinks the same thing about you, but you don't realize because you're drunk.
Yep. Well, I appreciate you coming on here, Matt, and talking about, your side of the fence and how it looks, especially from a pharmaceutical end. I think you're the first person that I've had on in over 200 episodes that has that pharmaceutical outlook when it comes to drugs and the overprescribing that's going on and the under evaluating that's going on the doctor's ends. And, it's almost like they want to just get rid of, because doctors make money on writing scripts. And
depends on the practice, but typically, yeah.
Yeah. And they just want to like make money. So they're like, oh, here's a script for this. And they send them on their way because the doctors are overloaded with patients and they don't have the time to really sit with the patient anymore. They have a 15-minute window. I see it all the time because I do scheduling. So when I do scheduling, I see the time is like a 10-minute window where like people will be like, well, how long am I going to be in the doctor's office? He's going to see you for 10 minutes or he's going to see you for 15 minutes. That's not enough time to evaluate and treat some of these patients.
And that's why, as a patient, like if you get nothing else from listening to this, as a patient, advocate for yourself. The first thing I want you to tell that doctor, because you may only get 4 minutes with him if he's fallen behind, the first thing you should tell your doctor is, I would like to avoid any substance with addictive potential because I've struggled with this in the past and I don't want to open up that can of worms again. You need to advocate for yourself. You need to say that, and you need to say it right away, because you don't know how long the doctor is going to be in that room. They definitely won't have time to hear your whole story. No physician does. There just aren't enough physicians out there, and there are too many sick people. So as a patient, if you've ever struggled with addiction, and if you're listening to this podcast, you almost definitely have, advocate for yourself. Put the stick in the ground. Say, doc, I don't want to touch opioids. I don't want to touch benzos. I don't want to touch stimulants. Try to work everything out with anything that doesn't have that addictive potential first. Again, there's a time and a place for them. Some people have horrific plane anxiety. Okay, take a benzo for your plane trip and never again. I'm going to have to get a procedure done on my eye. And the thought of a needle touching my eye gives me the worst anxiety. I'm going to need something to keep me down for that one procedure. But I'm not taking any of it home with me because that's a slippery slope. And JD, I know we're trying to wrap up here, but you talked about harm reduction, and I've got to step on a soapbox for just a minute. Anybody who has a loved one out there who picks up any kind of opioid, get naloxone. Please get naloxone. In most states, You can get naloxone without a valid prescription now. It can just be dispensed by a pharmacist. You might have to pay $30 or $40 out of pocket. It might be covered by insurance. Most insurance companies now will cover it if you're on an opioid. But even if, your mom is on opioids and she's taking them every day for her broken hip pain, opioids can still kill people if you take the same dose every day, because opioids are filtered out by your kidneys. And if you get sick, your kidneys slow down. And if your
I'm a
kidneys
big
slow down,
proponent of Vivitrol.
Vivitrol. Yeah. I'm not actually sure what that is.
It's an injection. It's an opioid blocker.
Oh, okay.
It's
Yeah, yeah.
basically the injection version of naloxone.
Naltrexone, probably. Yeah.
Naltrexone, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Naloxone is like pain reliever. But it's basically the injection. They put it in like your ass, not in your ass, but you know what I mean.
Muscles in your ass.
Yeah. And you do it once a month, and it takes away the cravings, and it's an opioid blocker and an alcohol blocker. If
Yes.
you drink alcohol, it makes you sick. And if you take an opioid, you don't get high and it makes you sick.
Yes, and blocks those opioid receptors. It sits right on them. So even if those opioid molecules want to come down and hit them, they can't. The receptors are taken. So even if you do get your fix, it's not going to work. And you know that. You injected it in your butt and it's going to last there for a month. You're not getting your fix. So that can empower some patients. But the one thing I want to say to everybody is, even if your mom's taking the same steady dose of Oxy every day, if she gets sick, if she gets dehydrated, if her kidneys slow down, she's going to overdose, because her kidneys are not going to clear the drug and she's going to continue taking the drug. I saw this all the time in hospitals. People you would not even expect, who all of a sudden, like, why are you not breathing? Why are you turning purple? And if your kid's not home, you die. And nobody ever knows why. So if you're ever taking an opioid for any reason, just get it. It can't hurt to have some on hand, and it might just save a life. Harm reduction goes so far. And if we can get naloxone in everybody's hands everywhere, we'll save thousands of lives. Pick it up.
I've started to notice that with opioids, they've been prescribing what is that called? What is that called? The
Narcan?
Narcan.
Narcan is naloxone. So what I'm talking about, get that naloxone, get your Narcan. That's the brand name. Yes, get it. Whether it's in the nose, there's an injectable form. Most people get the nasal spray now.
Yeah.
It's really easy to administer. One other thing about Narcan or naloxone is it will not do anything bad to anyone. So if you're not sure if someone's overdosed on an opioid, or if they're just too drunk, or if their blood sugar is too low, just use it. It won't hurt them. It can only possibly help them. Anytime someone's down, do it. Do it right away. You might just save a life and you won't hurt them, I promise.
Yep. I had a guy on the show that I met when I lived in Los Angeles. He was living on Skid Row and he was getting high in his car, and he was living in his car down there, and he told himself, I'm ready to die, so I'm going to do this shot, and it's going to be big enough that I can't take it. And he did. He passed out from the injection, and then a homeless guy walked by, saw him in his car, and had Narcan on him, and Narcaned him, and he came back to life because of that. This homeless guy that just stopped and saw him with a needle in his hand just passed out in his car and hit him with the Narcan, and it woke him right up. And, he got really lucky. I think that the needle exchanges that are out there these days are extremely helpful, and a lot of them give away free Narcan. I think it's completely gross going into CVS or Walmart and seeing it being sold for $45 a piece. Like, you've seen that, right? In pharmacies, in the over-the-counter drugs, they're now selling Narcan for $45. And it's absurd, because you can just go to a needle exchange or a harm reduction center and get it for free. It's just, when I first saw that, when I was in line at a CVS, I just shook my head like, you scam artists.
I mean, it's better than 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you couldn't even get it. There was a stigma associated with Narcan, which is utterly ridiculous. Why are we stigmatizing a medication that can't get anyone high and can only save lives? Why are we hiding it? Why are we not making it available? Now, why are we hiding it behind a $45 prescription fee? I think it should be free. And you're right, there are places to get it for free. A researcher at the University of Texas in the pharmacy program, his name's Dr. Lucas Hill. All he does is harm reduction work on the opioid epidemic. And he has fought tooth and nail both at the state capitol level here in Austin, but also in Washington, D.C., advocating for more funding to get more free Narcan in every corner of the country because we need it. And we're doing better. There are advocates going out every day trying to get Narcan more and more available, trying to get it in the hands of more and more needle exchange centers, harm reduction centers, but we need more of it. We need more. I hope that I can bring Dr. Hill and that branch of the pharmacy school into the high schools I'm going to teach at. I want to teach every high schooler in the country at every school level about Narcan, about naloxone, and about what it can do. Unfortunately, some people think that that's a political issue and fight back, which is absolutely ridiculous, but it is what it is, and that's my goal. I want to teach everybody about Narcan. Pharmacy messed this up bad back in 2005. The first exposure I got in hospitals was in 2009, 2010, and I saw drug seekers left, right, and center. We made this mess, and it's going to take a long time to clean it up, but work like what you're doing, JD, and work like what harm reduction people are doing, and then people individually choosing to empower themselves and choose sobriety. We're going to win this war. It's just going to take a long time, and I'm so sad for all the millions of lives we've already lost, but we can get out of this, and we will.
Leading cause of death, 18 to 45 is overdose now. And did you watch Dope Sick or Painkiller on Netflix?
I watched Painkiller.
Yeah, Dope Sick is very similar. They follow a doctor, they follow a patient, they follow, the Sackler family. Dope Sick is almost the same thing. They're both really good, though. It's not really good what they did, but it was a great portrayal of what happened in the late 90s and early 2000s about what they were doing. I mean, everyone knows the pain chart in the hospital, the 1 through 10 pain chart. That was Purdue Pharmacy putting that out there so that the doctors knew what opioids to give them and the strength to give them.
We still use that chart every day.
I know. And it came out 25 years ago, and it was all because of OxyContin. Simple as that.
It's despicable. But I will say the vast majority of healthcare providers out there rebel against this very system. There are some out there who lose their souls and decide, I'm going to turn into a pill mill. I'm going to make as much profit as I can, and I'm going to buy myself a big old lake house. And if my patients overdose, that's not on my conscience. But those healthcare providers are few and far between. For the most part, your doctors want to help you. Your pharmacists want to help you, but you also have to help yourself. We don't know what you're struggling with. We see oxycodone. We don't want to judge. Maybe you have bone pain. We want to give it to you. But if you're even thinking about quitting, scaling back, or anything else, I promise you, pull your doctor aside, pull your pharmacist aside, advocate for yourself, take a few minutes. There are paths out there we can take for you or for a loved one.
Yep. Well, I appreciate it again, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to sit down and talk with me today.
Absolutely, JD. I appreciate having you, or you having me on, and everything you're doing for the sobriety movement.
I appreciate it, bud. Have a good day.
You too. Adios.
Bye-bye.